My paranormal stories are a very long list. Some of them scared me so badly that they still bother me to this day. I'm 27 now and live in North Carolina, and everything strange that's ever happened to me took place here. My very first experience with something paranormal happened when I was around 3 or 4 years old, probably in 1992 or 1993. That's when I started having night terrors. I kept dreaming about these shadowy dog-like figures, and in those dreams, my neighbor's dog, a chow breed, would crash through my bedroom window and save me. As time passed and I got a little older, I started waking up from the dreams and actually seeing the shadow dog in real life. At first, I thought it was our black dog because it was short like the shadow was, so I called out to it. But this thing wasn't him. That same shadow kept appearing for months. I would wake up screaming and call for my mom. She grew really worried and became sleep deprived, so she took me to a psychiatrist. They ran all kinds of tests but couldn't find anything wrong. Even with that, the terrors didn't stop, and I developed severe anxiety from it, which I still have. I never really told anyone except my mom because even as a child, I knew people would think I was crazy. Years later, we moved across the street, and my best friend's family moved into the house. It took her 4 years before she started experiencing the same things. I had never told her anything about it because she scares easily, and I didn't want to add to her fear. But when she turned 16, she finally told me what had been happening to her. I almost cried because I realized it wasn't just me all along. She had been going through her own horror in that house, and I never had the heart to tell her it was already known to me. We stood in my kitchen one night and listened as things were thrown around in the house. I've always been very sensitive to this kind of energy, and when it happens to me, it's usually very intense. One of the last scary things that happened to me in her family's home was back in 2013. I had gone there to clean the house for her dad. He had to leave for an appointment and left me there alone, asking me to clean his son's room. While I was picking up and organizing his son's toys, something whispered, "Let's play again." I froze, covered in goosebumps, and I felt fear crawl all over my skin. My fight or flight instinct kicked in, and I ran out the front door faster than a cat. I sat outside smoking a cigarette and called my mom. After calming down, I decided to go back in. I yelled scripture into the room and demanded whatever it was to leave the space and leave me alone. It actually left the room, but it didn't leave the house. I could hear it pacing in the hallway. That man doesn't even have any pets, so there was no way the sound came from an animal. I started praying for his son's safety and blessed the room. I felt a little peace then and thought I had done something good, but I hadn't. When her dad pulled into the driveway, I felt real relief. The strange energy in the house always seems to be scared of him for some reason. You can almost feel the presence hide when he's around. After that day, I started having night terrors again, so bad that I'd wake up in tears, and I was already 24 by then. I felt unsafe, like something was trying to control me, and it made me feel small and weak even though I'm usually strong-willed. One night I even woke up to find I was choking myself. I had a terrifying dream of a Satanist church and saw a small boy throw his twin sister off a balcony as some kind of sacrifice. I'll never forget how real and vivid it all felt. My ex-boyfriend saw me talking and growling in a strange language in my sleep. I rolled over like nothing had happened, but he looked terrified. He told me I'd been doing that for 3 hours. I told him maybe it was just my subconscious, because I had sung in Latin back in high school choir. But the growling part, I still can't explain that. My night terrors got worse, and things started happening like knocks, doors flying open, footsteps, and objects going missing for good. A friend introduced me to a psychic online who told me how to bless a quartz crystal. I followed her directions, and the crystal helped me a lot. It eased the night terrors and gave me protection during dark moments. Now I live with my boyfriend and his mom, and 2 houses nearby had to be blessed by priests because of a murder that happened. We live next to a creek where Native Americans once lived, and his family planted blueberry bushes all around. Even though the homes were blessed, I still feel something around. One night, I even heard what sounded like a gunshot in the house. 2 days after hearing it, I was lying down, and something ran a finger up my side. I jumped and clung to my boyfriend. You'd think I'd be used to it by now, but I'm still just as scared as ever. Every place I've lived in this town has had something paranormal going on. Just last year, I woke up at 8:30 in the morning, hearing my friend call my name. I looked all over the house and didn't find her, so I got dressed and drove over. When she opened the door, I asked if she had called me. She looked confused and said no, but then told me she heard me calling her name at 8:30 that same morning. I realized something wasn't right. Luckily, I brought my sage with me and told her it was time to cleanse the house again. We started in the basement and worked our way to every corner, sending whatever it was out the front door. Since it was her house and her land, she did exactly as I did, which made it work better. But when I got back home, I realized I had made a big mistake. It followed me. After that, so many bad things happened. I went to stay at my dad's house where my sister, who was doing drugs, started acting even more violent than before. That wasn't normal, even with her drug use. I decided to cleanse the house with sage again. I had done this before, and nothing bad ever happened. I asked God to protect us all, but the moment I was done, my sister walked in and started trying to yell at me. She couldn't even speak clearly. She began choking on her own words and couldn't curse at me. She couldn't even look me in the eyes. It was like the energy of the cleanse clashed with whatever she had going on. After a week or two, I started using crystals because I needed more protection. Being sensitive and an empath, I've come to accept that I'll never fully escape these experiences. I just try my best to stay calm and not live in fear, even though it's really difficult. Over the course of my 49 years of life, I've had many strange and paranormal experiences. Early in life, I remember hearing a buzzing noise, something like electricity or bees, coming out of my dad's room on the third day after he passed away. Everyone in the house heard it. We followed the sound out the back door and listened as it faded into the night sky. Later in life, I lived in many houses that seemed haunted, and I used to joke that the rent was so low because of the ghosts. One time, I met a ghost cat that wouldn't let me cross the street. I saw its outline, but when I reached out to pet it, my hand went straight through. Another strange moment happened in my sister's apartment. She had 3 dogs, but the oldest had recently been put down due to health problems. My wife and I stayed the night at her place after she had already moved out most of her furniture. We had to sleep on the floor, and she stayed on the couch with her other 2 dogs. As my wife and I settled in for the night, she suddenly said, "There's a dog lying on my feet." I felt it too, so I moved a bit and rubbed the side of what I thought was a dog with my foot. I felt fur, but it wasn't warm. I grabbed a flashlight, and when we turned it on, nothing was there. The other 2 dogs were still on the couch with my sister. My wife said it felt like the dog floated down onto her instead of walking over. About 19 years ago, a close friend of mine died at just 25. I believe he came back to thank me in a kind of dream or out-of-body experience. Not long after, I was lying in bed and heard a coin drop somewhere in the house. I kept my eyes closed but could hear the coin traveling down the long hallway toward my bed. It spun in a circle at the foot of my bed and stopped vibrating right as my alarm went off at 5 a.m. I later found out my wife had woken up too and went to the kitchen. When I left for the day, she asked, "Do you know what woke me up?" I said, "A penny," before I even saw it. When we went to look, the coin had somehow made it all the way across a plywood floor and through a zigzag of laundry without stopping. Sure enough, there was a penny sitting at the end of the hallway. One final story is about my brother-in-law who passed a few years back. His death really hit me hard. He was always the person I went to when I needed healing. On Valentine's Day, about 10 months after his passing, my wife and I were driving home when the SUV's radio started switching stations and the volume started going up and down. Then it stopped on a song about dying young and played all the way to our driveway. I got out and cried. I told my brother-in-law he didn't need to prove anything to me anymore. I already knew he was still around. I just wished we could talk like we used to. A few months later, I had a big argument with my daughter. After she slammed the front door and went outside, I said out loud in front of my wife, "I hope my brother-in-law scares the life out of her." I regret saying that to this day. A few days after, my daughter started acting like a whole new person. She was sweet and helpful and did all her chores. When I asked my wife about it, she said, "She should tell you herself." I had no idea what she meant. My daughter came into the room, apologized, and told me what happened that night. After cooling off, she had gone to bed, but later felt something pick her up and lay her on the carpet. She didn't open her eyes at first, but then she felt herself being dragged across the floor. She could feel the carpet fibers brushing her face. When she finally opened her eyes, she was lying in the hallway. She ran back to her room and hid under the covers. I had to tell her what I had said that night and promised never to do anything like that again. I told her our loved ones need peace and shouldn't have to come back to help us. I warned her that when we open doors, we can't always close them again, and sometimes we let in things we never meant to. Still, that moment brought both good and bad changes in our relationship. She's still unsure if it was real and wants to forget it happened. My experience happened on July 21st, 2009, in Belmead, Texas, just 15 days after my mom passed away. After she died, I moved in with my sister. One day we all had plans. My sister and her family were heading out of town, and my 1-year-old nephew was very close to me, so I decided to keep him with me and take him to the bookstore. While everyone was getting ready, my brother-in-law turned on some rock music, but all of a sudden the stereo changed on its own to country music, and the volume turned up really loud. My mom always used to listen to country music on that same stereo. Later, I was in my room getting ready, and my sister told me she'd let me know when they were leaving. Since she hadn't said anything, I thought they were still home, and I assumed she was in her bedroom. I knocked on her door and heard a loud and clear voice say, "Just a minute." So I waited outside the door for her to let me in. After waiting for a while, I knocked again, but there was no answer. I called her name but still got no response. I opened the door and the lights were on, but no one was there. I looked outside and saw that the car was gone. I got scared. I got my nephew ready, made sure everything in the house was turned off, locked the door and left. My sister had only one house key since she had lost the other, and she gave it to me because I would be back before them. I stayed at the bookstore for a while, but then decided to head back home, knowing they'd return in about an hour. When I got home and unlocked the door, I heard running water. I ran into the kitchen and saw that the sink was overflowing and water was pouring out of the faucet full blast. The water hadn't been left on earlier, and I was the only one with the key, so no one else could have gotten in. That night, my sister and her husband went to see a movie. I didn't want to be alone, but I agreed to babysit. I made a big bed of pillows on the living room floor and was going to put on a movie for the kids. But first, I told all 4 of them to clean up their mess. My 3-year-old niece didn't want to help. I told her she had to get up and help or she wouldn't get to watch the movie. She still said no. Suddenly, she started crying, and when I asked what was wrong, she said Nanny. My mom, who had died almost 3 weeks earlier, told her she needed to behave for me and help the others clean. I was so shocked. My niece kept talking to Nanny for months after my mom passed. When we asked where she saw Nanny, she would say she was floating on the ceiling. My sister and her husband got back around 11 p.m. that night, and everyone went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I stayed up watching a movie. Suddenly, my brother-in-law came out of his room looking really scared. He said he felt a hand grab his foot while he was sleeping, and when he woke up and turned around, he saw my mom standing at the foot of the bed. That made sense because when she was alive, my sister would often send her in to wake him up from naps, and she'd grab his foot to do it. We had a lot of things like this happen afterward. We had a birthday party for my oldest niece on January 28th, 2010, and we took lots of pictures. When we looked at them later, we noticed in every photo there was a round light or orb above her head. These were different pictures of her opening gifts or playing outside, and in every single one, she was in a new position or room, but the orb stayed above her. We believed it was our mom visiting her for her birthday. Our mom loved us and her grandkids so much. She had even lived with my sister for years before she passed away. After she died, I moved into her room, and sometimes I could feel her there. Sometimes it felt like someone was touching my hair or gently rubbing my back, something my mom always used to do to comfort me and show her love. I know this story might not sound scary to some people because it's about my mom, but to me it was very scary even though I loved her. I'm a 22-year-old girl, and what I'm about to tell happened when I was 17. I live in Kerala, India, with my dad, mom, and younger brother. We moved into our new house 2 years earlier, and everything was normal. I usually stayed up late reading or listening to music. One night, I was listening to music for a long time, and when I finally got sleepy, I took off my headphones and checked the time. It was around 3 a.m. As I lay there, I started hearing a sound. When I listened closely, I realized it was the sound of a little child crying, and it seemed to come from the next room. I got up and checked all the rooms. My parents and brother were all asleep, and we always keep our doors open at night. I also looked outside to see if any neighbors had their lights on, but saw nothing. Confused, I walked into the dining room, and the crying sound was louder there. I asked, "Who is it?" And the sound moved to the living room. I followed it there and asked again, but now the crying was coming from my room. This time I was really confused. I walked back into my room, and the crying suddenly stopped. Before this, I had never had any paranormal experiences, though I always believed in them. My grandma used to tell me stories about her own strange experiences. I decided to try and forget it and just go to sleep. I shut my door, got into bed, and pulled the blanket over me. Just then, someone knocked on the door and there was a loud thud on the window. I got scared and stayed under the covers until I finally fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I felt silly and tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. I told my mom about it, and she told me to start locking my door at night and try to sleep earlier. I thought it was over, but after that night, I always felt like someone or something was in the room with me. It never tried to hurt or talk to me, but I could feel it watching me every night. This went on until I went to college and moved into a hostel. I didn't feel anything after that, not even when I came home for vacation. A year or two later, my mom called me one day in a panic. She told me that she had been lying in bed, unable to sleep, when she suddenly heard the sound of a child crying. She got scared because she knew no one else was awake at that time. She stayed quiet, listening. The crying grew louder, and she realized it was getting closer to her. Terrified, she searched for the light switch. Right as the sound got really close, she finally turned on the light, and the crying stopped. She jumped out of bed, locked the door, and slept with the light on that night. The next morning, she remembered what had happened to me and called me right away. Since that night, she's been locking her door too, and neither of us ever heard the crying again. March 2015, Orlando, Florida. My kids, wife, family, and friends have all had strange things happen in this house. It's not just one ghost here, but many. We think it's because someone who lived here before us used a Ouija board back in 2009. In that same year, I had a bike accident and broke my neck. I went through 2 MRIs, took strong pain meds, and had spinal injections. In March 2015, I was at my worst. I couldn't sleep and the pain was unbearable. So one night I asked the spirits in the house to just take me. What happened after that is something I've never heard in any story before. I usually had my son sleep with his mom because I couldn't rest, and the pain was worse at night. On the night it happened, I think I finally fell asleep at around 4 a.m. My small dog was in bed with me, and our pit bull was lying on the floor. I suddenly felt 3 fingers pressing under my back from under the bed. The pressure got stronger and started moving up my spine. I looked over at my little dog, who was panicking. Then the bed actually lifted off the floor a foot as the fingers ran up my spine. My lower body was frozen. When the pressure reached my skull, I thought whatever it was trying to enter my body, so I yelled, "Leave me now!" and the bed slammed back down. The next day, I called my sister and told my wife. All of us had experienced things in that house many times before. About 20 days later, I was working on my SUV in the driveway. I asked my wife to come stand near the jack while I worked near the tire. Suddenly, I felt the discs in my lower back start to separate one by one. I had surgery in that same area before, between L5 and L7. Then I felt a strong electric shock go through my back, up my arms and out my fingers. I felt it go down my legs and into my toes too. It was so painful, like holding live wires. I screamed and my neck made a loud popping sound. My wife heard it from outside the car. I fell to the ground and moved my hands and legs to make sure I could still move. I got up and told my wife something felt different, and I asked her to touch the bump on my neck where the disc used to stick out. But it was gone. I felt better, not perfect, but a lot better. The next week I went to see my pain doctor, but I didn't tell her the full story. I just said my neck popped back into place. At that point, doctors wanted to remove the bad disc through surgery. The doctor gave me more pills, but I didn't tell her I had already stopped taking them after 6 years. I wanted to see what would happen. Then 21 days after that first night, I still wasn't sleeping great due to some remaining pain in my upper back and neck. But something had changed. I could finally sleep on my side again, something I hadn't been able to do for years. My arms stopped going numb at night. One night at 3 a.m., I was sleeping with my little dog in my son's bed when I woke up. I felt a hand on my left shoulder, a knee in the middle of my back, and another hand on my lower right shoulder. Then something pushed really hard and popped my right shoulder back into place. I hadn't even known it was out. Since then, I haven't felt that same pain I lived with for years. I went to my doctor again, and this time told her the whole truth. I also said I didn't need the pills anymore. She believed me. Now I'm going through old records to see if maybe a chiropractor used to live in that house, because of the child stories. Kristen was just 5 years old when she was living with her parents in Trafford, Pennsylvania. She remembers her grandmother was in the hospital after having a stroke. She and I were really close, Kristen says. I never got to see her in the hospital because my mom and dad thought I was too young to handle it. One early Sunday morning around 5 a.m., Kristen suddenly woke up and sat up in her bed. I saw a woman standing at the end of my bed, she says. Kristen thought it was her mom, so she wasn't scared. She called out, but the woman didn't answer. I said, "Mommy," she says, but there was no reply. The woman just stood there and stretched out her arm toward Kristen. I started to get scared because I didn't know why my mom wasn't talking to me, she remembers. She began yelling, "Mom!" Her mother came running into her room, worried. She asked me if I was okay and why I was yelling, Kristen says. I asked her why she was just standing there staring at me and not answering. Her mother sat on the bed, checked Kristen's forehead to make sure she didn't have a fever, and told her it must have been a dream. She said she had been in bed the whole time. Kristen didn't quite believe it, but she went back to sleep. That same morning, Kristen's parents got a phone call from her uncle. It was news about her grandmother. She had died in her sleep early that morning. Kristen's mom began crying, but stayed calm to finish the call. My uncle told her the time of death was around 5 a.m., Kristen says. Her mom told Kristen her grandmother was no longer in pain and that she was now an angel in heaven. It wasn't until a few years later that Kristen's mom put two and two together, Kristen's vision and the time her grandmother died. She didn't tell me this part until I was 10 years old, Kristen says. I remembered everything clearly when she told me, and I knew it was my grandma saying goodbye. It was the spring of 1990 when Josh, his brother Aaron, and their mom were living in a trailer on a farm outside Laurelville, Ohio. One night, Josh woke up from a scary dream. He doesn't remember the dream now, but he remembers it scared him so much that he left his bed to go to his mom for comfort. I walked down the small hallway to my mom's room to try to get in bed with her, Josh says, but she told him to go back to his own bed. As he turned back toward the room he shared with Aaron, Josh saw something he'd never forget. Sitting on his brother's bedpost was a strange, dark figure that looked like a gargoyle or a gremlin. I couldn't see feet or legs, just a big square head and a hunched-over body, he says. It was about 2 feet tall and was looking right at Aaron. Josh froze. The creature turned its head like it heard him. I couldn't see eyes, just the shape of its face. Terrified, Josh ran back to his mom's room. She thought he was just scared from a dream and walked him back to his room to show him there was nothing there. And sure enough, the figure was gone. She didn't believe me, Josh says. I didn't talk about it again after that night. Maybe it was just a dream, right? Years later, when Josh was in 10th grade, he was sitting with a classmate named Ryan. He noticed Ryan had some big scars on his neck and asked about them. Ryan said that when he was 8, he ran through a glass door and almost died from the cuts. But then he added something strange. The night before the accident, Ryan told Josh, my brother saw a small, dark figure sitting on my bed watching me sleep. The way Ryan described it was exactly like the creature Josh had seen years earlier. Sandy wanted to call her grandmother to tell her all about the new Chatty Cathy doll and other presents she got for Christmas. But the house phone was too high up on the wall for her to reach on her own. Her dad and brother were outside shoveling snow, and her mom was in the shower. Sandy couldn't wait. She was too excited. I was getting impatient, she remembers, so I decided to pretend to call my grandma on the toy phone I got for Christmas. In those days where Sandy lived, there were no dial phones. Every call had to go through an operator. When I picked up the toy phone, I clearly heard an operator say, "What number, please?" she says. Shocked, Sandy gave the operator her grandmother's number, which she still remembers. The phone started ringing, and then her grandmother answered, saying hello in her thick Italian accent. Sandy started telling her all about the doll and the other gifts. Her grandmother asked where Sandy's mom was. Sandy explained that her mom was in the shower and her dad and brother were outside. Her grandmother knew Sandy couldn't use the real phone by herself and asked how she climbed up to reach it. Sandy told her she was using her toy phone. Her grandmother laughed and said to have her mom call when she got out of the shower. When her mom did get out, Sandy told her about the call, but her mom just laughed. Sandy kept insisting, so her mom finally called her grandmother. When she found out that they had really talked, Sandy got in trouble. Her mom thought Sandy had somehow climbed up to the real phone. Sandy swore she didn't, but her mom didn't believe her. I got in big trouble for lying, she says. I spent the rest of Christmas in my room, upset about it. Still, she couldn't help but smile. Somehow, she really had spoken to her grandmother using a toy phone. That morning, it had to be magic. It was early summer in 1954. Douglas was 8 years old and living near Epping Forest in a suburb east of London, England. His neighborhood had a mix of 1930s houses, open fields, and lots where bombs had hit during the war. Nature had taken over many places, which the kids loved to explore. Life wasn't easy for Douglas back then. My dad had just left, he says. The war had taken a toll, and he left us for a younger woman. Douglas lived with his mom and two sisters. They mostly ate potatoes, cabbage, eggs, and bread. His mom worked at a factory nearby to help pay for their house. One day after lunch, Douglas walked his mom to work before heading to school. He asked for a few pennies to buy some candy. I still remember the look on her face as she opened her empty purse, he says. We both felt embarrassed. He skipped away feeling bad for asking. He ran across a field, along a muddy path, and into another open space. Still thinking about candy, he asked Jesus out loud to please give him money for sweets. That's when a deep male voice came from above and behind him. Kick the grass. Douglas looked around but saw no one. Kick the grass, the voice said again. He did. It was a thick bunch of wild grass that had taken over old bomb sites. Kick it again, the voice said. He did, and out rolled a coin, worth 3 pence back then. Delighted, Douglas ran to the sweet shop and bought some candy. I've remembered this my whole life, and he says, it really happened. I even ate the candy. The voice had come from behind and above, but no one was there. It was deep, male, and British. Douglas never heard it again, and no other prayers for money worked after that. Alice was 8 and living in Glasgow, Scotland. Her parents sometimes visited an old woman who lived alone. She was kind and would sometimes ask Alice and her little sister to sleep over. I don't know why, Alice says, because she never really talked to us, but maybe she was just lonely. One night the girls were staying in her guest room. The room was small with old furniture, a double bed, a tall chest of drawers, and a dressing table with 3 mirrors. It was very hot that night, and Alice couldn't sleep. Her sister was snoring loudly, which didn't help. The bed was covered in heavy blankets, so Alice reached up to pull the cord and turn on the light. She sat up and looked into the dressing table mirror, but instead of seeing herself, she saw a thin old lady with white curly hair. The woman had a big white towel wrapped around her. She was looking down and rubbing her upper arms with the towel. The room she was in looked different from the one Alice was in. It had dark wood panels and a picture rail. Then the woman stopped rubbing her arms, looked up, and smiled at Alice. Scared, Alice ducked under the covers and stayed there until daylight. I know I wasn't dreaming, she says. I've thought about it so many times. She wasn't hurt and doesn't believe the spirit meant any harm. Who the woman was or why she appeared is still a mystery. But Alice noticed something strange in the old woman's bedroom. Her own dressing table mirror was covered with a pink scarf. I knew right away she had seen something in her mirror too, Alice says. I wish I could go back and ask her about it. Rachel's baby was just 6 months old, and they were living with Rachel's parents in Bethany, Oklahoma. One evening, while the baby was sound asleep, Rachel, her mom, and stepdad stepped outside to have a smoke. They listened to the baby monitor to keep an ear on the baby. My daughter had been sleeping for about 2 hours, Rachel says. Suddenly, Rachel and her mom heard someone talking on the monitor. We looked at each other, Rachel says. Then they heard the baby laugh like someone was playing with her. At first, Rachel thought maybe the monitor picked up a neighbor's signal. But then the voice started singing, and the woman singing said her baby's name, Elena. Rachel ran inside to check. Her mom stayed outside, still listening. As soon as Rachel opened the nursery door, the singing stopped. There was no one in the room, Rachel says. She returned outside and the singing started again. Rachel asked her mom if she knew who it could be. Her mom smiled and said she thought it might be Rachel's great-great-grandmother. It was Halloween. My mom and sister went to the neighbor's house, and I was alone at home. It was about 4:30, and it was already starting to get dark. I took the chance to sneak up to the attic to look at Halloween stuff. I ran up quickly, knowing I'd be in trouble if my mom came back and caught me. Even though the windows were shut, I felt a cold breeze go through me. I didn't think much of it at the time. I looked through the bag of costumes and found a witch's hat. As soon as I put it on, something invisible hit the hat. I dropped the bag and turned around quickly, but no one was there. As I bent down to pick it up, I saw the bathroom door handle turn, and the door opened fast. I walked into the bathroom, trying to figure out what caused it. I suddenly felt like someone else was in the room. I looked out the window and saw my mom and sister still outside. But as I turned away from the window, I saw in the reflection that the bathroom cupboard door was sliding open. I turned around fast but saw nothing. Scared, I threw the costume bag back into the cupboard and ran downstairs, waiting in the front yard for my mom to come back. That night, I had a nightmare about what might have happened if I stayed upstairs longer. I saw glowing red eyes looking at me from the cupboard. Since then, strange things have happened up there, like things breaking by themselves. I don't know what I disturbed that Halloween night. It was Halloween evening in 1995. Pamela and her brother were driving home on a country road near Greenbelt, Maryland. It was getting dark. They were going about 25 to 30 miles per hour on the two-lane road, her brother driving. Suddenly, they saw a black car with two bright headlights coming up fast behind them. In no time, the car was next to them, trying to pass. Pamela says, "It looked like the old black car was floating instead of driving." "This old car was driving straight into traffic," Pamela says. "It looked like the other cars just kept going like nothing was wrong." My brother and I looked into the car, and we saw four teenagers, two boys and two girls. What was strange was they were wearing old farm clothes from the 1930s or 1940s, and they looked super pale like ghosts. The girl sitting in the front seat slowly turned her head to us, smiled, then turned back. The two in the back just stared at us. Then out of nowhere, the car floated by and disappeared into the air. But that wasn't the last time we saw them. In 1997, my brother and I were on the same road at the same time, heading home, Pamela says. And the same ghosts appeared again, doing the exact same thing. Then in 1998, my brother was driving alone on that same road, and the ghost showed up again and acted out the same scene. Maybe they were going out for Halloween and had a horrible accident. Now they're stuck on that road forever driving. May they rest in peace. On Halloween, many people test their courage by visiting creepy cemeteries. Sarah and her husband, who were both curious about ghosts, decided to do just that on Halloween night in 2002. It was something, Sarah says, that she will never forget. "We went to Blood Cemetery in Moano, Wisconsin," Sarah explains. "I think it's called something else now, but the Blood family was the first African-American family in that town, and they're buried near a stone with a book carved on it." Sarah's husband grew up nearby and often heard scary stories about that place. That got Sarah excited, so they took a camera, two flashlights, and a voice recorder and went to the small graveyard. "We went to the Blood Monument first," she says. "We waited to see if anything would happen, but nothing did. Then we walked around a bit. We were about 48 feet from the monument when I suddenly turned around and saw what looked like a big glowing blue ball. It was shaped like a human head and floating that high off the ground. I didn't look long enough to see if it had a face, so I'm not sure if it was really a face or not." That was all it took. Sarah and her husband ran like never before. The ground was dry, but they both tripped while running. Her husband said it felt like something was pulling him into the ground. Sarah said it felt like hands were grabbing at her pants and ankles. At the edge of the cemetery, they stopped to catch their breath and got brave enough to try again. They took the camera and recorder for one last walk around the graves. "I tried to open up my feelings a bit," Sarah says. "I felt drawn to one part of the cemetery. We stood there for about 10 seconds before I suddenly felt I had to leave. I said, 'Oh my God, we have to go,' and started running. My husband followed. I snapped a picture of the spot as we ran. Back in their car, they listened to the recording. We heard our feet shuffling in the leaves. Then it went quiet. Then a voice said, "Get out." It didn't sound human, and not like an animal either. Sarah is sure it was a demon. The photo showed nothing, except two small red eyes. Teenagers and even college students love Halloween just as much as little kids. It's a chance to test their fears and pull scary pranks. Chris will never forget Halloween in 1981 when he was in college in his hometown. He and 5 or 6 friends decided to visit a small graveyard near the campus. A rusty old fence surrounded a few graves of teachers and their families. I felt something weird, Chris remembers. A few minutes later, I heard the crunch of footsteps in the leaves. The others heard it too. We all looked around but didn't see anything. We thought maybe someone was trying to scare us. At first they laughed, but the steps kept coming, louder and closer. Chris kept watching down the fence line, squinting into the dark. He saw nothing, but the footsteps came nearer. Then out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. From the dark woods came a black figure. It was tall, dressed in a cloak, head to toe, Chris says. It moved in quick bursts, getting closer like it was jumping ahead in time. Then it stood at the fence corner. It turned and faced us. It had no arms, no face, no feet, just a cloak that floated above the ground. Chris got scared, turned, and ran without a word. It felt like someone was running beside me, he says. He looked and saw one of his friends. They stopped running and talked about what they saw. They said the same thing. I still see that friend often, Chris says. Except for one time after that Halloween, we've never talked about it again. Halloween also makes people pull out Ouija boards, even if they sit unused the rest of the year. Bea and her friends, Ingrid, Anna, Laura, and May, decided to use one during a sleepover in Australia. Bea's parents were away, and her siblings were visiting an uncle, so they had the house to themselves. Sleep wasn't in the plans. Anna, who loved the paranormal, brought her Ouija board. I have 2 dogs, Muffy, who's tan, and Shadow, who's black, Bea says. Ingrid had a white dog named Haley, Anna brought her dog Ernie, and Laura had Archie and Rosie. They were all in the backyard. We hadn't heard a sound from them for about an hour. In Bea's room, the girls sat in a circle with the board. They all put 2 fingers on the planchette. Anna asked, "Is anybody there?" The board moved to, "Yes." Ingrid asked, "Who?" The board spelled Gail. They asked again, "Who are you?" Again it said Gail. They asked for more info, but it just said Gail. Bea then asked, "What's going to happen tonight?" The board spelled dogs. Bea asked, "What are you going to do to our dogs?" It replied, "You'll see." Bea pushed the board away. Then they all sat there shocked. Suddenly, a loud whimper came from outside. The girls ran down the stairs worried. We opened the door and ran out, Bea says. They found Archie crying in a corner. They didn't stop to check anything else. They just picked up all the dogs and ran upstairs. Once there, they checked each dog. Laura screamed. They all rushed to her and saw Archie had a strange burn mark on his side. It was a pentagram inside a circle. We held our dogs all night and said we'd burn the board in the morning. What happened on Halloween night in 2005 stuck in my memory because there were 6 of us, and we talk about it a lot. There's a legend about an old haunted mill deep in the woods. The story says a family of 3 lived there. A dad, a mom, and their 4-year-old son. One day the mom lost her mind and drowned the boy in a pond next to the house. The dad came home from work at the mill, saw his son, and fought the mom. She ended up shooting him in the attic and hid his body under the floorboards before hanging herself. The legend says if you go to the attic and insult the woman, she'll appear. We were bored, so 5 friends and I drove to the mill. I had a digital camera and hoped to catch a ghost. I don't believe in orbs and usually say they're just dust or bugs. The woods were dark and the moon couldn't shine through. When we got to the old house, we were shocked to see 2 big black horses out front. I took a picture. We looked for a way in and found a basement window. We had to crawl. I was last in line and felt someone push me. I yelled and looked back, but no one was behind me. Then I put my hand down and felt something sharp. I looked. Nothing there. But my hand stung like it had thorns in it. Inside, we used flashlights to explore. The walls were newer drywall, not old wood, but graffiti covered everything. Upside-down crosses and 666. Finally, we went to the attic. We stood in a circle and held hands. No one wanted to shout, so I did. I cursed loudly and waited. Nothing happened. We waited 15 minutes. No ghost. Feeling disappointed, we left. I was last again. I snapped one more picture. As the flash lit the room, I swear I saw a woman in the corner. I freaked out and ran. Nothing else weird happened, but outside the horses were gone. I took pictures of the house, barn, pond, and shed before we left. Back at my friend's house, we looked at the pictures on the TV. The horse photos showed them with red glowing eyes. The house photos had lots of orbs, but the others didn't. The attic pictures were normal, but one side photo of the house was creepy. It had a few orbs, but one was bluish purple and shaped like a skull. I still have those pictures. Everyone who sees them says the skull one is the creepiest. The skull was right above the spot where I hurt my hand. In the days after, I got a weird rash on my fingers. It went away, but no doctor could explain it. Every Halloween, around midnight, I see a white figure of a young boy staring at me. This first happened in 2005 when my mom and I moved into our apartment. I was 10. My mom was asleep. I never sleep well on Halloween because I get scared. That year, I was lying in bed thinking about Halloween, and I started drifting off. Suddenly, I felt someone tickling my feet. I opened my eyes and saw him, a boy in white, far across the room. I closed my eyes thinking it was just my imagination, but when I opened them again, he was closer. I ran to my mom and told her. She didn't believe me and told me to go back to bed. I did and fell asleep. I dreamed about the boy all night. It scared me a lot. The thing is, I see him every year. He becomes clearer and looks older. Now I'm 13, and he looks 13 too. It happened in London on October 31st, Halloween. I was at my Halloween party and couldn't find my 7-year-old son. I checked his room. He wasn't there. Then I heard him laughing inside the wardrobe. I opened it, and he was in there alone laughing. I just thought he was playing like any kid would. But later, after the party, while cleaning up, I couldn't find him again. I went upstairs and checked the wardrobe. He was in there again, laughing. This time I asked him what he was doing. "I'm playing with Mary," he replied. I thought maybe one of the kids was in the wardrobe playing with him, so I opened the other side. There was no one there. I figured he just had an imaginary friend. I told him to stop talking about imaginary friends because they're not real, then went back downstairs to finish cleaning. About 2 hours later, at 10 p.m., I was done. My son was already in bed. I was really tired, so I went to my room. But when I walked in, I found a message written on my mirror using my lipstick. It said, "You're wrong. I am real. I am Bloody Mary." I ran straight to my son's room. He had bloody scratches on his arms, legs, and face. He shouted, "I hate you. This wouldn't have happened if you said she was real." It was Halloween 2004. It happened at my cousin's house in Antipolo City, Philippines. It was a nice day, and I was excited to see my cousins and other relatives. I had spent many summers with them before, and we always made the most of our time together. That day, my cousin and I went out to buy music CDs and grabbed a DVD to watch at home. We went straight back to her house and used the back entrance that led to the second floor. We saw her nanny and her niece there. My cousin stayed in her room, and I went downstairs. The ground floor of the house had been unused for about 3 months. Two of my other cousins used to sleep in two bedrooms downstairs, but they had left so guests could use the rooms during holidays. The house has 3 floors, but only 5 people live there. As I stepped onto the last stair, I saw a tall, dark shadow, about 6 feet tall, move past the kitchen door to my left. I didn't think much of it. I was more excited about playing the CDs. I had also seen shadows like that before, so I was kind of used to it. I picked a CD and played it softly on the stereo to relax. I was sitting on the couch when my cousin came down and turned the volume up loud. We were enjoying the music when suddenly the volume dropped to 0 by itself. I just looked at it, confused. My cousin got mad and thought I used the remote. I pointed at the remote. It was still sitting on top of the stereo. That's when she realized I didn't touch it. She screamed and ran upstairs, too scared to stay. I was left alone, trying to understand what just happened. A few seconds later, I also ran upstairs to check on her. The nanny saw me and told me she heard strange sounds while we were downstairs. She said the sounds were like frogs or crickets humming inside the house. About an hour later, my cousin and I went back downstairs to watch a movie. But something weird happened. While watching, we felt scared because the sounds in the movie started repeating, like an echo that came after each scene. It felt like something was copying the sounds. That was enough. We stopped the movie and turned up the music again. This time we turned on all the lights downstairs. My cousin even shouted at the ghost, saying she wanted to enjoy time with me and it should go away. We kept listening to the music and talking, but suddenly one of the figurines from the top of the stereo flew off and smashed on the floor. My cousin got angry because it was her mom's favorite figurine. At first, we thought maybe the bass from the music made it fall, but there were lighter things on top of the stereo, and they didn't move. The figurine didn't just fall, it looked like someone threw it. That's when we realized we weren't welcome down there. Something was trying to stop us from staying in that part of the house. We later found out that we weren't the only ones who had weird things happen in that room. Other cousins and even the nannies before had experienced strange things. Some of the nannies had even left the job suddenly without asking for their pay. Maybe they were too scared to stay, worried about being hurt or bothered by the shadow we saw. That experience is still very special to me, even though the memories fade a little over time. Satori tells us, memory fades like breath on a mirror, especially those that weren't clear to begin with. But this is what I remember. I don't know what I saw, but I know it changed me. Satori's story happened at an all-girls Catholic school she went to. People said one of the bathrooms there was haunted. Girls talked about how cold it felt in that bathroom and how they saw and heard strange things. Some said they always felt like someone was watching them. But Satori didn't believe them. She thought they were just stories. One Halloween, Satori and her friend decided to go into that bathroom and try to talk to the spirit. They went into a stall that had a bathtub in it. That bathtub was said to be the center of all the ghost activity. Her friend got into the tub and started touching the walls. Satori joined her. She says, I did too, and I felt something amazing. It was like a light electric shock from the walls and the taps. I was surprised but not scared. I felt happy, not afraid. They got out of the tub, and that's when she saw her. It was a ghost, a pale girl with dark hair and sad eyes. She wore a slip and had cuts on her wrists. Blood was dripping into the tub drain. The ghost looked like Satori. Even then, she didn't feel fear, just sympathy. She said to her friend, I think she put the razor in the soap dish. Her friend replied, I know. Suddenly, Sagittari felt a strong presence, like warm energy moving through her, like how your skin tingles before a storm. She said to the ghost, come out, don't be afraid. The energy grew stronger. Then she said, it's okay. We understand. You can go back now. The warm feeling moved up through her body until it disappeared. Then there was no more energy. When her friend stood up to leave, Sagittari felt very sad and lonely. She realized the ghost didn't want them to go. Sagittari said, I'm so sorry, but we can't help you. You need to go back now. Then the sadness lifted. The room got brighter. She felt the ghost leave. She never came back, and no one talked about her again. But Sagittari says she will never forget her. That ghost taught her something important, that compassion can heal all wounds, even for someone who has died. When I was in preschool, I had a best friend named Mary. I remember her clearly, even the sweater with a lamb she always wore, and how her haircut looked a lot like mine. I remember playing with her in my room, sitting with her during lunch and craft time. I even remember her coming to my birthday party and playing tag with me after school. But when I started kindergarten, Mary stopped coming to school. I never saw her again. A few years ago, now that I'm 17, I asked my mom what happened to Mary and where she went. My mom told me there was no such person. She said I used to talk to myself in my room all the time. She said I would run around by myself pretending to play tag, and that even my preschool teacher said I used to talk about a friend no one ever saw. I blocked out a lot of my childhood memories until I turned about 15, so I don't remember much from that time. But Mary is someone I've never forgotten and can't seem to forget, and I never knew why. I live in a very small town known for a school bombing that happened in the late 1920s. I checked some old records and found a girl who looked a lot like Mary who died in that explosion. Some people said they've seen kids in old-fashioned clothes at the school, but I've never heard anyone say they saw them inside homes or wearing modern clothes. I went to the same university for both my bachelor's and PhD. There was a wonderful woman named Jennifer who taught reading and content area. All the guys liked her because she was beautiful, but I liked her because she read The Giver to us out loud. She was an amazing teacher and working on her own PhD in literacy. A few years later, Jennifer moved to South Carolina to teach. I started my PhD too, working in the same grad office where she used to be with her coworkers. Then we heard the news. Jennifer had been murdered by her boyfriend. Everyone was heartbroken. She was loved by so many people. Just a few days after her funeral, and after her body had been brought back, I was in the office early in the morning before anyone else. Our grad office was a fishbowl inside a larger office space that was locked and had motion sensor lights. As I passed a locked door and window, I saw a woman with short, dark hair walking inside. It was strange because the lights didn't turn on when she moved. I went around the corner to the key code door and let myself in. I walked to where I saw her, and only then did the lights come on. No one was there. The whole place was empty except for me. I swear it was Jennifer, coming back to say goodbye to the place where she had spent so many happy years with her friends. It scared me a lot, but it also made me sad. In 8th grade, I went on a school trip called the Louisiana Tour. We visited different important places in South Louisiana. One of those places was Myrtle's Plantation, known as one of the most haunted places in the country. There are lots of stories about it. At one point, we were standing in a room with the whole group while the tour guide talked, though I don't remember what she was saying. As I stood there, I started hearing what sounded like someone pressing piano keys. I heard it a few times and started looking around for the sound. I didn't see a piano, but I kept hearing the noise. I asked my friends nearby if they could hear it too, but they all said no. When I heard it again, I said, "There it is again," hoping they'd hear it that time. But they didn't and thought I was just imagining it. I kept looking around the room. Everyone was looking at the tour guide except for one woman. She looked at me and pointed to her ear, asking with her eyes if I heard it too. I nodded. Then the tour guide began telling a story about a soldier who had died there. She said guests often reported hearing him playing the piano at night. I didn't know what to think then, and still don't now. I talked to the woman when we left the room, and she said she heard the same piano sounds as me, but her husband and son hadn't. A long time ago, when I met my ex, she and her family lived in a mobile home. My ex had a younger sister who had some mental health struggles and had been in and out of hospitals. The two sisters shared a small room. One day before our son was born, my ex told me that her little sister used to wake up and talk to a man in the hallway. He always carried a suitcase and wore a hat with a brim. Everyone just thought her sister was imagining it. Years passed. My ex and I had a son. Her parents moved out of the mobile home, and she moved in with our son. Our son slept in the same room she had shared with her sister. One night after our son had been asleep for a while, we heard him get out of bed. We figured he wanted to ask us to go to the bathroom, but instead, we heard him talking. He said hi and started telling someone about his favorite stuffed animals, especially his ducky. I called out to him, asking who he was talking to. He peeked his head out of the room and said he was talking to the man with the suitcase and hat. He was only about 2.5 years old, and no one had ever told him about what his aunt used to see. That really freaked us out. I come from a pretty religious family. We were Jehovah's Witnesses, then RLDS, and then Baptists when I moved in with my mom. Still, my whole family has always believed in ghosts, spirits, demons, and things like that. As a kid, I didn't really understand ghosts outside of what I saw on TV. That changed when I was about 8 or 9. One day I was lying on the couch in the living room while the grown-ups were sitting and talking in a circle nearby. I was listening to their stories when my grandma suddenly said, "Oh, Michael," which is my dad's name. She said she had seen a man's ghost walk through our house the day before. After that, I started having some experiences of my own, and I've always liked hearing stories from my family and others. My first ghost experience, I believe, was with the man my grandma saw. I had just come home from school and grabbed an orange for a snack. I peeled it and went to throw the peels in the trash can, which was in our pantry room. From the front door, you could see straight into the kitchen and the pantry beyond that. As I walked into the pantry, I started feeling nervous, like someone was standing right over me. I dropped the peels into the trash can and closed the lid. And right then, I heard a deep, scary laugh right behind me. I ran out of the room and told my sister. She said she'd heard the same laugh in that room before. That made me feel a little better, but the room had no windows or doors where sound could come in, and the laugh was so close behind me. The second experience I had was in 5th grade. It was the first time I got to stay home alone while my dad and siblings ran errands. I was excited to finally have the house to myself. I sat down at the dining room table to finish my homework so I could play video games afterward without sharing. Everything was quiet and fine. About 20 minutes later, I heard the basement door rattle. I thought maybe the wind was making it move, so I ignored it. But it rattled again. Then suddenly I heard footsteps, fast footsteps, running through the house. Not just a few steps here and there, but full running from the basement to the back bedrooms. My dog started barking, and I froze in place. I felt like if I moved, something bad would happen. Finally, I grabbed the house phone and ran outside to the edge of the driveway. I called my mom and told her what happened. As I looked back at the house, I saw the curtains in the front room move like someone was peeking out at me. My mom called my dad, and I waited outside for 30 more minutes until they got home. I didn't stay home alone again for a long time. This next story is one my mom told me. She has always had a gift. She can see and hear spirits. One night at dinner, she told us a story and warned us not to get too scared. When she was 6, she lived in Virginia with her parents and 4 siblings in an old house. One day, she was inside playing with her dolls. She was sitting near a vent and started hearing something coming from the basement. She leaned in and put her ear to the vent. What she heard was someone calling her name in a soft singing voice. Valerie, Valerie. She got scared, ran outside, and told her parents. They didn't believe her and said she had a wild imagination. Years later, she learned that a woman had hung herself in that basement. That always stuck with her. Here's another story about my mom. When I was around 23, she moved back to Virginia when I was about 17 or 18. My brother went with her. She's a nurse and went to care for my grandpa, who was very sick. As he got worse, my mom started looking for another house to move into. She couldn't bear to stay in the house where her father was dying. She picked a few houses to look at. The first one was too small. Then she and the realtor went to the next one. Everything seemed fine until they stepped inside. My mom said she took just a few steps in, looked into the first room, and saw a man standing there. He wore old clothes from the late 1800s or early 1900s, a suit, top hat, and carried a cane. Behind him were 6 little kids. They were thin, dirty, and wore torn clothes very different from his. Then in her head she heard the man's voice. He told her the house was his, that she wasn't welcome, and that she needed to leave now and never come back. Or else. It all happened so fast. The realtor asked if she was okay. My mom had frozen and gone pale. She just said she felt sick and didn't want to look at any more houses. That night, my grandpa passed away. Last year, after my son turned 1, we were having dinner with our whole family like we did every Friday. So my son saw my grandfather a lot. My grandpa was quiet and proud, but when he thought no one was looking, he would make silly faces to make my son laugh. A few nights after the funeral, my son, who usually crawls into bed with us in the middle of the night, started laughing really hard at 2 a.m. I got up to check on him and found him sitting in the living room in the dark, just laughing. I said, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing?" He said, "Papa funny." I got nervous and picked him up to take him back to bed. As I carried him, he said, "Bye, Papa," and blew a kiss into the air at nothing I could see. Hat Man. When researching paranormal activity, you will often come across shadow beings, also known as shadow people. These are shapes of darkness that appear in various forms, from animals and bugs to human-like figures. Sometimes you only see them briefly. Other times you may experience full paralysis or even feel them physically. The most interesting and unique ones involve something known as the Hat Man. He is usually seen wearing a fedora-style hat, a 3-piece suit, and either a cape or a long trench coat. Some people say he carries a watch that hangs from his pocket, and he may have a goatee or be completely clean-shaven. His eyes might glow red or be solid black. No matter how he looks, he is almost always unsettling and sinister. The next 4 stories are true encounters shared by people just like you and me who saw the Hat Man. These stories have confused me for years. I am logical and always looking for explanations, but my senses tell me these events were truly paranormal. Some of us can see spirits with our mind's eye, and that makes me question everything I think I know. We all know about sleep paralysis, those dreamlike hallucinations when you wake up but can't move or speak. But what if it happens before you fall asleep? Sometimes just seconds after I lie down, I sense and see a presence. Usually he stands behind me or in a doorway. He is what many call the Hat Man, pitch black, wearing a wide-brim hat and trench coat. He never moves closer or farther away. Many times I lie awake, afraid to close my eyes because I know what's coming next. Soon after this image, my ears start to ring, my head buzzes, and that spreads into my body, and then I'm paralyzed. I feel like he's trying to read my thoughts and emotions, not to possess me, but to understand me. One of my biggest fears is being smothered or drowning, and during these episodes, I feel like I'm running out of air. I've had these episodes almost all my life, even before I knew what shadow people or the Hat Man were. Words can't describe the fear I feel when I hear about others' experiences, and I can't alert them. There are times when the ringing starts and the vision begins, and I've learned I can interrupt the process if I act during the ear ringing. Once the buzz takes over, it's too late. I haven't had an episode in a while, but that's because I learned how to snap myself back during the ear ringing. Then the episode shrank and finally stopped. Just talking about it now brings a sense of a presence. I can almost hear the ringing. It was June 2014 in Los Angeles, California. I was 13 and sleeping on the top bunk of a bunk bed, lying on my back with knees bent and feet flat. I was drifting off when I wanted to move my legs flat but found I couldn't. It got a bit cold without a blanket, and I thought about calling my mom who was in the next room, but I couldn't speak. I stayed like that for minutes and it became harder to breathe. My heart beat fast and I felt pressure on my chest, though I saw nobody there. Finally, something lifted the control and a voice told me to look down at the floor. With the nightlight on, I saw a shadowy figure, a man in a 1940s suit and hat, and in the blink of an eye, he was gone. After that night, I had more episodes, though I never saw another figure. I heard strange thumps in the wall once, but figured it was neighbors, until I realized it was early AM and no one else was awake. I looked into it online and found stories about old hag syndrome, but this didn't feel the same. I've been learning a lot about shadow people recently. I live in Coffeyville, Kansas, in an apartment built during the 1920s. The building and the theater next door are famous for paranormal activity. I have lived here for 12 years and met the shadow man early on. At first I saw movement, but didn't think much of it. But then I realized something was there. A dark figure would walk across the room near the east wall. I told my friends about what I called the shadow man, not knowing it was widely known. He wears a fedora, what I call a Dick Tracy hat, and a trench coat with the collar turned up. No other features are visible, just the dark shape. One time I sensed him behind me and to the left. When I turned in my chair, my head and shoulders passed through his shape. Time slowed. What felt like a second lasted like 60. He passed through the shadow into the wall. I've never seen him in that area again. I never felt fear, just curiosity. One morning I got up and found all of my shoes and boots lined up outside the bedroom closet, arranged as if someone had stepped out. It seemed like the shadow man playing a trick. A few years ago, the building was renovated when a new company bought it, and since then I rarely see the shadow anymore. It was always fascinating and thrilling. This happened in the late 1980s or early 1990s. My brother and I were walking home from Crednell Hollow. We spent most of the day exploring the old home sites. Crednell was a land company. The hollow was closed in the mid-1970s and the houses burned down. It was late and we decided to walk the 30 to 45 minutes back home, something we had done many times before. We reached the head of the hollow and were on a straight path leading to Silas Hollow and the turnoff toward our house. Suddenly, we heard something moving down the hill to our right. We thought it was an animal until we saw an old man come off the hillside and step onto the road. He wore a broadcloth coat and an old black slouch hat shading his face. He walked hunched over, hands behind his back. We stepped aside so he could pass us. I said, "Hey, how's it going?" He muttered and nodded. We both felt uneasy but didn't say anything. About a minute later, we heard the same noise from the hillside. That same man walked down again and stepped into the road. This time we didn't speak, and my brother whispered, "Don't look him in the eyes." After he passed the second time, my brother said, "Frank, something isn't right. We need to get out of here fast." We ran nearly all the way home. When we reached our house, we stopped to catch our breath. We went to his porch afterward to try to figure it out. Later, we told our mother, and she said our father and older brothers had seen him years ago too. She didn't know who or what he was. Even though it's been over 20 years since we saw him, I still think about him. Who was he? What was he?